Hi, my name is Michelle Sosa, and I am here today with the founder of Healthful Stories. Manny, thank you for joining us. We would love to hear more about your journey to full health, and so let's get started.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for having me. First of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate the time that you're taking to interview me about my journey with severe obstructive sleep apnea.
Hi, Manny. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. Happy to. So I am nearly 40 years old. I'm originally from the island of Guam. I have a wife and a daughter. I've lived in a number of places throughout my life, Guam to Portland, Oregon, from Portland, Oregon to Germany, from Germany to Philadelphia, from Philadelphia to Boston, and then from Boston to San Francisco. And now my wife and my daughter and I, we are new to the Seattle area, having just moved in January.
Great. Well, welcome. Thank you for that introduction. So we're here today to discuss your journey to health with obstructive sleep apnea. Can you just let the audience know what obstructive sleep apnea is?
Well, thank you, Michelle. Obstructive sleep apnea is a potential serious sleep disorder which occurs when individuals repeatedly stop breathing while they're sleeping. As you can imagine, when your breathing stops while you're sleeping, it results in severe fatigue and issues such as brain fog and the like. And so it can be very debilitating. It also is associated with worse patient outcomes. You can understand that oxygen is critically important to the functioning of the body. Sleep apnea has been associated with cardiac issues and other issues that result in long-term debilitating health conditions.
Thank you for walking us through what obstructive sleep apnea is. I think we can all appreciate that sleep is very critical to living your best life. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey? When did it start? How did it make you feel?
Well, we'll start from the beginnings. You know, I've lived with sleep apnea my whole life. I just didn't have a name for it. All I knew when I was younger is that I snored extremely loudly, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought that, some people snore. Certainly it was embarrassing. I distinctly remember times when I was a kid going to overnight retreats and being painfully aware that, my snoring would disturb the other folks on the retreat, even to the point where at one point I was hit with a bunch of pillows in an attempt to wake me up. Which failed. And so I've basically lived with the condition my whole life. I just didn't realize how debilitating it was until I fixed myself in January of last year. But to talk about my journey towards diagnosis, it was one where I never realized how difficult life was, the state I was in. Not knowing what the impact my snoring was having on my overall health, not being able to put a name to my condition, nor really having anything to compare it against. For example, having severe fatigue and needing caffeine to power through the day. I did not know that wasn't necessarily a normal state of being because I knew nothing else. The need to take a nap in the middle of the day, or the desire to take a nap in the middle of the day, wanting to fall asleep immediately after dinner. I didn't know these types of things weren't normal. And so it took quite a bit of time before I realized that I might need help. And in fact, it wasn't until 2007 when I finally decided to go see a sleep doctor specifically for my snoring. And I was very shocked to hear that I did indeed have sleep apnea, and that my AHI, apnea-hypopnea index, which is a measure of disease severity, was in the upper 60s, which means that 60 times an hour, literally once a minute or more, I would experience a stop in my breathing at night. That is considered a severe condition, and certainly it was impacting my life, although I wasn't aware of how badly it was impacting my life at the time.
I'm sorry to hear about your condition. It sounds like you truly weren't living your best life. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe your energy levels at the peak of,
So again, I had nothing to compare it against, and so I don't know if I could give a specific number to it. I would say that, long drives were difficult. That was a challenge for me. I definitely would drink coffee, caffeine, to stay awake, blast the radio, roll down the windows, all the various things that folks do, give myself little slaps on the face to ensure that I could stay awake. I didn't realize that there were other impacts on my life as well. My mood, I was a very impatient person, and I chalked that up to my father being a very impatient person and his father being a very impatient person. But at the end of the day, I didn't realize that it was a chronic lack of sleep was causing my feelings of irritability that I would only later come to realize was the direct impact of the sleep apnea and the uncontrolled state I was in. Now, thinking about what happened after I was diagnosed, I did receive a prescription for what's called a Cpap device. It's a continuous positive airway pressure device, which was essentially a pump that will blow air into your mouth to keep your throat open while you're asleep. The Cpap device was prescribed again back in 2007, and I just could never tolerate it. I would put it on, and after 1 to 2 hours of it being on while trying to sleep, I would rip it off my face and go the rest of the night without it. And so a treatment that I knew could potentially be tremendously helpful as sort of the number one way of dealing with sleep apnea was something that I just wasn't able to use effectively and continuously. I abandoned the device. I think over the course of the next decade of having the device, I maybe used the device maybe 3 to 5 times, and each time without success. And you can imagine when you are in a severe state of fatigue, the idea of adding yet one more thing to your routine in terms of setting up a device, making sure that it is clean, was simply too much for me in my condition. And so it was this recursive negative effect of being too tired to address my disease, and of course the disease progressively getting worse over time. Fast forward several years, I had moved to Boston and still was uncontrolled. Went ahead and got another sleep study done, confirming once again what I already knew, is that my sleep apnea was severe and not under control. I went through a period where I was undergoing a workup with Massachusetts General Hospital to explore maxillomandibular advancement surgery. This is a surgery in which literally a surgeon will cut into the jaw, both the upper and the lower jaw, extend the front of the lower and upper jaws forward, and hold the bone in place with screws, with the intent to improve the amount of airway in the back of the throat to allow for more unobstructed breathing at night. Needless to say, I went through an entire workup, have this great picture of the MRI of my face and my skull, but never completed the process because I had to move from Boston to San Francisco for work, and I abandoned that particular approach. And it wasn't until 3 years later in 2019, while living in San Francisco, that I once again took up the opportunity to see clinicians in order to see whether or not I could finally get my sleep apnea addressed.
So 2007, you were diagnosed, you had a sleep study, you were prescribed the CPAP, it didn't work. Fast forward, you were in Boston.
And remember, it's not that it didn't work, it's that I was never able to tolerate it.
Oh,
I'm
right.
sure it would work if I was able to use it.
Okay, so you weren't able to tolerate the CPAP, and then you said fast forward to San Francisco, you started to look for something else that might work. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I started from the beginning, as you would whenever you move to a new location with new physicians, performed a sleep study once again. It once again confirmed my severe sleep apnea. But this time we were exploring new options. One of the first options that was recommended was an oral appliance. So this is a new device that literally works like a mouth guard, with the one exception that it will help to move the lower jaw forward and potentially help increase the airway at the back of the throat, again with that mechanical movement of the jaw. Unfortunately, I tried that, and it didn't work. In the meantime, I had purchased an oxygen sensor to wear to monitor my blood oxygen levels. And again, once I would monitor my oxygen levels, I would see that very clearly my blood oxygen would go into the low 80s at night. So when your blood oxygen level is that low, I understand that 85% blood oxygen can already result in organ failure. And so going into low 80s is a severe situation and does indeed require medical attention if you find out that you're in that state. And so, I was dejected when the oral appliance didn't work. I purchased a chair to see that whether or not sleeping upright might enable me to breathe better at night. I'd read online that might be helpful, and so bought a lawn chair rather than make a big investment, and sat up in the lawn chair, and again, that lawn chair and that oral appliance didn't work as a combination. Meanwhile, I did manage to go see an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and in an examination with the ENT doctor, the physician at the University of California, San Francisco, she mentioned to me that I did indeed have a narrow airway. She also mentioned to me that one of my tonsils was extremely large. And so one of the things that she recommended was a UPPP surgery, a uvulophariangioplasty surgery. I think I'm saying that correctly. And with this UPP surgery, she believed that she could one, remove the tonsils, but also remove some of the excess tissue at the back of the throat to ensure, again, that the airway would be less obstructed. And so we went through the surgery. There was a 2-week recovery period that was recommended. So I did it over the holiday when I was luckily enough to be off work. And there was a period of recovery where liquid diet, couldn't chew, etc. And I pushed the limits of trying to get to chew and eat as quickly as possible. I was lucky. I didn't feel a lot of pain. In fact, my physician said I was one of just 2 people post-surgery who didn't require any narcotic medication. And so very proud that I guess my pain thresholds or my surgery allowed me to move forward without the pain medication. So this was January of 2020. I had just completed my surgery. I was very excited to wear my oxygen sensor to see whether or not it worked, and I was disappointed. Unfortunately, the oxygen sensor told me that even with the surgery, I wouldn't be, I still had a severe condition to manage through. And I went through a period of a few weeks where, I was pretty sad and despondent, thinking that, maybe there's nothing that can be done for my sleep apnea. But in a moment of luck, I thought to myself, well, I had tried these various interventions. I mentioned that I had tried to sit upright. I had mentioned that I had tried the oral appliance. Of course, I had gotten the UPP surgery, and of course, I was wearing the oxygen sensor to monitor my oxygen levels. And so I thought to myself, well, I have nothing to lose at this point. Let's try all of these different solutions at once. And so I draped a blanket over the lawn chair to sit upright. I strapped on my oxygen sensor, placed the sensor on my finger, that's how it works. I placed the oral advancement device, the dental appliance, into my mouth, and I went to sleep. And that was probably the first truly good night of sleep that I had had in the 40 years that I've been alive. And I felt absolutely incredible the next day and in the weeks that followed.
That's remarkable that you were able to put these solutions together and experience a synergistic effect. Can you walk us through what it's been like since you've discovered what works for you?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I'll describe the solution. The solution isn't for everyone. I would say this: if you can tolerate the Cpap machine, there are other machines. There's a BiPAP machine, a bilevel, a positive airway pressure machine that some people tolerate a bit better these days. And there are other mechanical solutions as well. There are also other surgeries that folks might consider. I will say this: if the Cpap or the BiPAP machines work, definitely use them if you can tolerate them, as they are the gold standard treatment for sleep apnea. However, if you are like me and have difficulty tolerating the devices, even after working on the settings and seeing folks who can help you make the adjustments to the devices themselves, then perhaps, trying many of the things that I've tried, whether it's the oral appliance, whether it's the UPPP surgery, whether it's I highly recommend for everyone the oxygen sensor. There were times in my life where I would sit awake at night and not want to go to sleep because I was afraid I would not wake up. The oxygen sensor does a couple of things. The first, of course, is it monitors my oxygen. And if my oxygen levels do go below a certain threshold that I can set, right now I have mine set at 91%. I originally had it set at 88%, and I've slowly ratcheted it up over time. If my blood oxygen levels go below that threshold, it'll emit a sound, and that sound will wake me up. And when I'm awake, I will turn, I will twist, I will move to position my throat to the point at which I can fall back to a sleep again, and hopefully, go the rest of the night without hearing that beep and get the restful sleep that we all deserve. And so certainly these are the things that worked for me, and certainly can be tried Of course, certainly consult your clinicians. Clinicians have been part of my journey all the way through to today. But I will say this, it did take unorthodox methods for me to get to the place where I am today.
And do you have any other advice for those who are seeking to improve their quality of life with sleep apnea?
Well, I have to first talk about, the importance of what this has meant for me and for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can imagine, all my life feeling tired, having what's called brain fog, this feeling that you're running, you're not necessarily able to keep up with information as people are speaking with you, keeping track of conversations, the inability to stay awake, much past dinner time, the inability to read stories to my daughter, who is now 5 years old. All of these things were signs that something wasn't quite right with my life and that it could be so much more. I just didn't realize it. My mood, right? Being sleep deprived, being irritable. For those in the viewing audience who've had newborn children, that feeling that you get when you just didn't get quite enough sleep. Imagine what that's like year on year for nearly 40 years. That was essentially my life. And so you can imagine that mood, that irritability, that sudden anger, has a tremendously negative impact on our relationships. What it's like to be slower than I would like, make mistakes that I feel, and of course my reaction to those. And it wasn't pretty at all. And I'm very ashamed of what I was under the influence of severe sleep apnea. And so what I can say today, as I sit before you, as I speak to you, is that my life has been completely transformed. I've gone from what I would call a 30% life to 100% life, literally overnight. My fatigue, I have more energy. I am able to wake up early without any negative feelings. I'm able to power through the day without much caffeine. I still drink a little caffeine, but not as much as I used to. I no longer crave sugar. I no longer feel immediately that I need to go to sleep right after dinner. My cognition, my ability to think clearly has improved dramatically. I can keep track of conversations. Whereas previously I would struggle to come up with words to say. Now I can speak more quickly and more fluidly without struggling to find the most basic words to express what I want to say. And that's a huge benefit. In addition, right? My mood has improved dramatically. I am a much more patient person. I no longer get angry for very little things that happen in my life. And certainly that has had tremendous impact on my family, on my ability to be a good husband and a better father. And so to me, that in and of itself is invaluable. And so, all the way through to, deciding to start this organization, healthfulheroes.com. I wouldn't have had the energy to take this on in my old state. And now that I am healed, that I'm managing through my condition, that my snoring has 95% disappeared, that my blood oxygen levels are maintained, typically at 95% plus every evening because I'm measuring and tracking how I'm doing. It's been simply transformative.
Manny, that is a fantastic journey that you just shared with us, and I hope that viewers can appreciate your transparency and vulnerability in sharing your story, and I hope the story helps many others. Any last words before we conclude our interview today?
So here's the advice that I have for everyone. First and foremost, keep working at finding a solution. If one thing doesn't work, try something else. My only regret is that I went years upon years upon years knowing that I have a severe health condition, but not paying any attention to it, not realizing that it was having such a tremendously negative impact on my life and the lives of those around me. And so keep at it. Don't let it fall to a lower priority because there are other things going on in your life. Make it a priority. It makes a huge difference for you and those around you. The second thing is, don't stop if something doesn't work. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to tolerate the Cpap device. Unfortunately, the oral appliance didn't work. Unfortunately, sitting up didn't work, but I kept at it. Granted, I wish I could have come up with the solution that I had much sooner, and maybe had I completed the surgery back in 2017 in Boston, maybe that would have fixed things from then on. But unfortunately, life got in the way, and I ended up moving from Boston to San Francisco. So just keep at it. The solutions are out there, and it's absolutely worth your time to make it a priority and keep moving forward, even if the first few things that you try might not work. It makes it even more difficult when you're in a situation where you're fatigued and you're tired to continue to power through, find these solutions. I've been lucky. I've had the support of my wife, Michelle. She has been a tremendous support to me as I go through my journey, helping me to book appointments, going to appointments with me, and helping me through to ensure that I could finally get to a place where I could find the solution that worked for me. And so my advice to you is to make it a priority. Do not get discouraged when something doesn't work. Continue to fight for yourself, and I'm confident that good things will happen. Sometimes it just takes a lifetime.
Well, there you have it. Thank you for joining us today. Make yourself a priority, live your best life, and join us today at healthfulheroes.com.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you as well. Thank you for listening, everyone.